In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be protected by a bodyguard of lies. Hello, darlings. I'm Astrid Deinhard, and with that great Winston Churchill quote, I am back to continue our Spies, Ties and Lies new subseries of World War II. Okay, before I begin, I'm wearing this enormously pretty tie for Johnny. Just that you know. Okay. War and everything around it is fascinating. Winning, losing, life and death, strategies and weapons, conspiracies and treason. The falling of empires, kingdoms and governments has fascinated humanity for ages. And as Margaret Macmillan writes in her book, How Conflict Shapes Us, here it is, economics, science, technology, medicine, culture, all are instrumental in war and have been shaped by it. Without war, we might not have centralized states, penicillin, radar, or rockets, the change in the role of women on the home front, as workers or even on the battlefields. Throughout history, writers, artists, composers, and philosophers have been inspired by war, whether to condemn it, exalt, or puzzle about it. But it also brings forth humanity's worst impulses, as we show in our series War Against Humanity that is hosted by Spartacus. Now, before I go on, thank you ever so much for your supportive comments under the previous episodes. They warmed my heart, and thank you for the lot of inspiration that you gave me in the comments of subjects and people to talk about in this area that we should not forget. We will not. It's a big theme, but we will do our very, very best to cover the subject for the next 100 years. Joram will be on board with writing. Here he is. And we will even go into espionage before World War II over on our Time Goes channel. Spartacus and Anna will be part of presenting this global secret venture. So let's send them our love as well. Here they are. Here too, I will for a moment go back to the time before the war as I begin the story of the two gentlemen, Erwin Respondek and Sam Edison Woods, whom I have a personal connection to because Sam actually lived here in this house where we shoot all our episodes and where we live. Sam actually did not sit in this very chair because we changed the chairs, and I can show you the chair. In a book by Larry Loftus, here it is. I found a quote by Gustave Flaubert describing the necessary characteristics for a successful spy. Be regular and orderly in your life, that you may be violent and original in your work. One could write a whole book about that quote, couldn't we? Monsieur Flaubert also formulated the following sentence. There are people whose job is simply to act as intermediaries for others. You step over them like bridges and walk away. Another book, I guess. Now, let's find out if any of these descriptions apply to Erwin and Sam, even if the two are very, very different kinds of agents. Sam having an important official position with a proper salary. Networking and getting information is kind of protected by diplomatic status through the US government. And Erwin, who also has a job and a title that he uses for networking and getting information, but the spying part is for him extremely dangerous. He's on his own, working against his own government, acting out of personal conviction. He is determined, worried about his country that has become Nazi Germany, the injustice, the racism, and suppression. He deeply hates the Nazi Party. He's on the liberal center-right of the political spectrum himself, a member of the now forbidden Centrum's party, and that was tightly connected to the Catholic Church. He does not have the protection of an agency or a government. If he's arrested, he knows he will be executed. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's first look back at what happened before these two gentlemen have a lot to do with each other, with consequences. They are born on opposite sides of the globe and under very different circumstances. Erwin is born in 1894 into a Catholic and conservative family, financially settled and stable. His father, a businessman from Upper Silesia. On the other side of the globe, Sam Edison Wood, 2 years older than Erwin, born in 1892, that is the son of a sawmill worker. Sam goes to high school in Purvis, Mississippi, studies manual arts in Valparaiso, then goes on to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology before joining the United States Marine Corps Aviation Army. Erwin joins a signaling unit in World War I, falls extremely ill and barely recovers, but it gets him the hell out of the army. He hates combat, blood, sweat, and tears. He is more a suit, tie, and desk person. Sam gets married to Katie Rose Anderson before he leaves for France in 1918 to happily join the war effort. But the war is over before he can be sent to the front. So he soon goes back to the States, only to find his wife dying of the Spanish flu, having given birth to their little daughter barely a month before. That is the second time death plays a dominant part in Sam's life. When he was only 15, he unfortunately killed his own brother-in-law in a hunting accident. After that, he took care of his sister's child from a very early age. These two terrible events mark him for the rest of his life. Sam always wants to help, be useful, because he knows what it feels to be powerless. And he despises that. Back to Erwin. He becomes famous. Here is how and why. He's interested in politics and very gifted in mathematics. While the war rages on, he finishes his studies at the tender age of 23, earning a doctorate in macroeconomics in 1917 by writing a dissertation on the French War economic from 1914 to 16. Then, one day in 1919, everything changes when he writes a pamphlet about the unfortunate misunderstanding of the Treaty of Versailles reparation agreements. The peace treaty the Germans are faced with by the Entente powers that same year. He gets a lot of attention because he becomes Ehrenkonsul. I don't know if that actually the position reflects what the translation to honorary consul implies. I don't know, maybe you know. In any case, he's now officially an expert in all questions of reparation politics and the League of Nations. That's something, right? He's offered a post in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and soon develops tight connections with the highest ranks of German industry. Karl Friedrich von Siemens, Robert und Karl Bosch, Wilhelm Ferdinand Kyhle, chairman of the supervisory board of the IG Farben, and Karl Duisburg, also IG Farben. And he is assigned as assistant of Hermann Büchler, who becomes the Vorsitzender des Verbandes der Deutschen Industrie. That is the chairman of the Association of German Industry, the top of the pops of all German companies and their foreign subsidiaries. His network also expands into the academic sciences with tight personal connections to the Kaiser Wilhelm Society, the place where you find dozens of Nobel Prize winners around the conference table, including Albert Einstein, who, by the way, did not get a Nobel Prize for his energy equals mass multiplied by the speed of light squared, but for the discovery of the law of the photoelectric effect. in case that is of any interest to you. Now, I'm mentioning this because Erwin's connection in this area will have deep impact on the coming war. You just wait for that. Meanwhile, Sam joins the US Army Education Corps and is sent to France, Germany, and Czechoslovakia, where he meets his second wife, Milada Paula Vadračekovova. Okay, I should know this name because this lady lived here. I try again. Milada Paula Vadračekovova. Okay? Not my language. Who also once lived here in the tea house. In 1993, she actually died in what is now our living room, where we record between two wars, it's true. Sam stays in Prague for 8 years and is promoted to inspector of all trade departments of all US embassies in Europe. That is quite a post. As Germany descends into political chaos in the early 1930s, Erwin joins the Centrum Party of Chancellor Heinrich Brüning in 1932. But they are forced to close the party when the Nazis take power in 1933. They both hate the Nazi party a lot. Heinrich gets into so much trouble and becomes enemy number one. Well, one of the multiple enemies number ones the Nazis had, right? Okay, so that was not a special thing. A side note here. Around this time, espionage is still not a permanently organized thing in most countries. But now the SIS, the Signal Intelligence Service, the first permanent US intelligence service, start their work in a tiny black room. To find them, you had to go along a very long corridor of an abandoned building complex to find room number 3416. It has a huge safe, like a bank. For all their documents, in charge is William Frederick Friedman, a US Army cryptographer. In 1940, subordinates of his, led by Frank Rowlett, will crack Japanese purple cipher, thus disclosing Japanese diplomatic secrets before America's entrance into World War II. But they will not yet have cracked the naval code. Important, which would have been essential to get clearer warnings of the attack on Pearl Harbor. You know, our subject. But we will pick up here a bit later, promise. Back to our guys. Brüning soon has to flee to the States, but Erwin and Heinrich stay in close contact. That will prove to be very important for our story. By now, Erwin is married, works as a consultant for the industry, practical, and himself becomes chairman of the Association of German Industry. The Respondex eventually move into a grand house in the Mariannenstraße 3 in Berlin, where they entertain one party after the other with highly important guests and friends, including Franz Halder, who will eventually become Chief of Staff of the German Army High Command. And now, in these Nazi years, Sam becomes the trade attaché to the US Embassy in Berlin. He quickly builds up a tight network of contacts in the German capital. Here are a couple of VIPs in it. Okay. Wolf Heinrich Julius Otto Bernhard Fritz Hermann Ferdinand Graf von Helldorf. Powerful, important guy. He becomes general of the police and Obergruppenführer in the SA, the Sturmabteilung, and Obergruppenführer of the SS. Bernhard Ignatius Joseph Maria Berghaus, who is one of the most influential industry moguls in Germany, owner of more than a dozen huge companies. That's not bad for a start. But Sam's most important contact is, who is it? Our friend Erwin responding. Sam and Erwin are finally together, and who is surprised, Sam is invited to Mariannenstraße 3. Charlotte, Erwin's wife, is a great cook and host. The couple has a couple of servants staying with them, no money problems, enough food and wine to make the place attractive for all kinds of people. And then there are these interesting little chats after an exquisite dinner in Erwin's library. Lots of cognac, cigars, and talking and listening. Okay, soon Erwin starts sharing information with Sam that he hopes can damage the Nazi government. He gets a codename, Ralph. While everybody knows that this Ralph exists, nobody in the US government or Nazi Germany, except our two guys, has a clue who is behind this name. Sam becomes a permanent guest at Mariannestraße and a listener, becoming ever more friendly with his host, Erwin. Let's go to the theater one day, huh? My limousine will pick you up. Great, looking forward. Things like that. Went back and forth. And as the world descends into war, the two couples are regularly frequenting the Berlin clubs and theaters together. Kind of a couple thing. Sam and Milada and Erwin and Charlotte. And when some Nazi Caruso gets really into it, singing very loud on stage, Erwin slips multiple papers of high interest over to Sam, and they quickly land in Milada's elegant handbag. But then one day this happens. In early 1941, Erwin gets information that can't wait for the next theater event. He has to see Sam immediately, so he dashes off to the US Embassy at Pariser Platz, around the corner from his office. And because I like what our editor did in my Spies and Ties announcement video, you may see this wonderful sequence again. Editor, please. A medium-sized German guy walks from his office around the corner straight to the US Embassy across the Pariser Platz. There he is, right in front of the door. Knock, knock. This time, bypassing all the official channels, Sam forwards Ralph's explosive reports to the State Department in Washington, describing the full strategic, political, and economic plans of the German Reich's leadership about Operation Barbarossa. The US government is suspicious, of course, but Respondek's identity and reliability is confirmed by his former party friend, ex-Chancellor Heinrich Brüning, who is now teaching as a professor at Harvard University.
Not in economics, I hope.
I hope not. Okay. Anyway, with Brüning's stamp of approval, the American State Department classifies Ralph as a reliable source. Respondek's report is of truly staggering import, as it confirms the suspected attack on the Soviet Union that is in the planning with clear evidence through operational directives. Respondek's report is now confirmed by Japanese diplomatic telegrams intercepted and deciphered by the USA, and you know by whom, right? The US are now fully aware, and Stalin will be informed by the British as well as his own spies, but as you know from our weekly episodes, he will not believe what he is hearing. But for the US preparation for war, which is in 1941, they still think will be in Europe first. And for the Allies already at war, the steady flow of information coming from Erwin through Sam is of staggering importance. You see, the war of secret information and its manipulation is as old as the pyramids. The advantage of knowing your enemy's true intentions has dominated the reign of every monarch, emperor, pope, king, queen, and military leader. His next move, his weaknesses, planned plots, false messages, possible murder attempts by charming mistresses or wives even, meant sometimes personal survival. Holes in newspapers led to walls with ears. Secret ink led to pens as pistols. and satchels as radios, codes, and code breakers. Determined and highly skilled individuals working as private entrepreneurs, ecclesias, political, industrial, and military spies, agents, double agents, and triple agents, led to the creation of huge secret organizations that made sure who was to trust, who was to turn, who was to kill, or not. Organizations like the one that started in room number 3416, for example, called NSA today. A wall behind the wall meant getting into the enemy's secret organizations themselves, to be able to walk around their bodyguards and know the truth, as Churchill so rightfully said in the beginning. It meant to win or lose the war. From the history of the assassins in Egypt to the secret cyber agents of today like Edward Snowden. I'm going to ignore that. And just there, when our plot thickens, that is all we will tell you about Sam, Erwin, and their secret endeavors today. Next stop will be how Erwin and Sam begin to unravel the Uran project, the Nazi German nuclear weapons program. Indy did a special about Stalin and the Barbarossa intelligence he received, and you can see it right here. And join the Time Ghost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com so that I can tell you even more of these lovely stories. Bye-bye, darlings. I see you next time.